Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Links are in the description below. Please show some love of the author and me. On to the show.
After launching a wave of offensive spells to vent his anger, Isekaied opened his own domain world and suppressed Lin Li's domain world mercilessly. In the previous battle, Isekaied couldn't be bothered to display his domain world. If the previous battle was just a teaser, the battle now was truly a true blue fight for life. In Isekaied's domain world, a prosperous world that was under the rule of the High Elves was displayed, just like Anral during the Dark Age, which was recorded in history. In this domain world, the world tree covered more than half of the world, and a large number of High Elves could be seen in the canopy of the tree, continuously attacking Lin Li. Even though it was just a spiritual existence, Isekaied's domain world was much bigger and stronger than Lin Li's desolate domain world. Under the pressure of Isekaied's domain world, Lin Li's one world seemed to be facing doomsday as various spatial rifts appeared amidst the constant tremors. The light of the debris of the stars shone through the rifts, looking as if they would break free at any moment. Fortunately, Isekaied clearly had not obtained the true essence of the domain world yet, and thus it couldn't be compared to the Immortal King's domain world. The Immortal King's domain world was already a real and existing one, which could coexist with and be parallel to Anral. Just like the worlds that Lin Li had walked through in the past, including Alana from 1,300 years ago, and the undead world from the resurrected Tree of Eternity, it would be able to continue existing even after the departure of the Immortal King. In fact, it would even continuously evolve and survive on its own. Isekaied's domain world clearly had not reached the level of the Immortal King's yet, which was the reason that Lin Li's domain world could survive by a small margin. Although the 7 pieces of the debris of the stars continuously flashed and appeared in the rifts, they did not get shaken out under Lin Li's control. Hence, the domain world did not collapse under pressure. At this moment, everyone in the expedition team had already been integrated into Lin Li's domain world by Lin Li. Hence, no one was idling about at all at this moment. Instead, they were continuously trying their best to resist the attacks coming from Isekaied's domain world. Deep down, they were well aware that that was all they could exhibit in a battle of this level. If they still did not put up a fight now, they would no longer have the chance to do so in the future. The people in the expedition team felt like they were experiencing a war at the end of the Dark Age, because they were facing enemies like the High Elves in Isekaied's domain world, whose countless High Elves were continuously attacking Lin Li's domain world. Although the strength of each and every one of the members of the expedition team had been greatly improved, they were still weak and helpless in the face of the High Elves that were pouring in endlessly. They were like a tiny boat that would face the danger of capsizing at any moment. Lin Li did not defend himself passively, and even though it seemed that he had been suppressed, he did not give up on finding a chance to retaliate. Although Isekaied was still extremely powerful now, the loss of his body had still impacted him greatly. In particular, Isekaied had gone through a body fusion once, which caused plenty of his soul power to deplete. With the influence of the magical crystal, his strength was probably only at level 27 now. Although there was only a difference of 1 level between level 26 and level 27, the two were actually worlds apart. However, the debris of the stars that Lin Li had was already in its complete form, and could truly exert combat power that ordinary level 26 sanctuary powerhouses could not compare to. Isekaied was obviously completely enraged, especially when he saw that the insignificant minions of the expedition had actually joined the battle against him. The anger within him could not be suppressed at all. "You are a bunch of minions. How dare you intervene? Die!" With a loud roar of anger, Isekaied extended his arms, and a giant hand that was condensed by mana immediately broke through Lin Li's domain world and grabbed the people of the expedition. The giant hand of mana almost covered the sky of the entire domain world and seemed to emit infinite pressure. Before it even landed, it made the members of the expedition feel extremely hopeless. To them, it was simply a punishment from the gods, who seemed to want to destroy them and the world together. Although Lin Li could leave the members of the Brilliant Shrines and Rotterdam Kingdom's teams in the lurch, he could not abandon the elites of the Tower of Dusk from his team. He immediately waved his hand, and 7 dazzling rays of light immediately emerged from the domain world, forming a large colorful storm below the mana hand. Boom! The giant mana hand collided with the colorful storm forcefully, causing the entire domain world to shake violently as well. Thunderous sounds came with the appearance of the rifts in the space, and the sky and earth were continuously shattering amidst the tremors. The members of the expedition below the storm were also shaking violently, and were unable to stabilize themselves. They fell onto the ground in a messy manner. On the other hand, the giant mana hand that had collided with the colorful storm did not disperse separately, but instead reached a stalemate with it. The colorful storm was continuously revolving around the hand like a grinding wheel, wearing it down and making ear-piercing sounds of metal being rubbed against stone. When the members of the expedition heard those sounds, they found them extremely deafening, and it was as if their heads were about to burst because of the noise. If it had been in the past when Lin Li had not obtained the other half of the debris of the stars from the well of the sun, the colorful storm formed by the power of the 7 pieces of the debris of the stars probably would have been slapped away and dispersed by the giant mana hand. However, Lin Li was now holding complete pieces of debris of the stars, and he also simultaneously obtained more experience in using the debris of the stars from the Immortal King's incarnation. His combat power had increased by more than a few dozen times. Lin Li continuously triggered the release of the power of the 7 pieces of the debris of the stars, and dazzling rays of light were fused into the colorful storm. Despite being under the pressure of the mana hand, the colorful storm did not decline at all, and instead grew even stronger. As the colorful storm revolved continuously and wore Osric's mana hand down, the hand seemed to have almost become illusory. You've obtained what he wanted. Indeed, he's left everything for himself. Although he had long seen Lin Li using the debris of the stars, Osric got even more infuriated when he truly felt its power. Osric had used the debris of the stars before. Back in the mausoleum, his perfect body used the debris of the stars, nothingness. However, a powerhouse like Osric, who was at the peak of the sanctuary realm, did not take the power of the incomplete debris of the stars seriously. However, through the collision between the giant mana hand and the colorful storm now, Osric was immediately certain that the power of the debris of the stars in Lin Li's hand was far from comparable to the power contained in the debris of the stars that he had used. If Osric still could not guess anything from the changes, he wouldn't deserve to be called a mythical figure second only to the Immortal King. As the Immortal King's favorite disciple, Osric had always thought that he would have a share of his teacher's legacy, be it the Sky Castle or the debris of the stars. However, the reality was that the Immortal King not only did not leave the Sky Castle to him, he had also given the debris of the stars to someone else, which was unacceptable to him. However, Lin Li was baffled by Osric's angry words. Clearly, Lin Li had obtained the debris of the stars himself, but Osric seemed to have said that the Immortal King had left everything for himself, including the debris of the stars and more. When Osric snatched the magical crystal, he seemed to have said the same thing. Lin Li knew since long ago that he seemed to be very similar to the Immortal King in terms of appearance, and there had been many people who mistook him for the Immortal King in the past too. However, Osric was the Immortal King's disciple, who had followed the Immortal King for countless years. So how could he be mistaken for someone just because of his appearance? Through the conversation he had with the Immortal King's soul imprint in the Well of the Sun, Lin Li could vaguely feel that his arrival in Anral seemed to have something to do with the Immortal King. However, Lin Li definitely did not think that his physical existence and the Immortal King would have anything to do with each other. However, facing the furious Osric, Lin Li knew that he couldn't ask anything, and was too weak to do so anyway. At any rate, the Immortal King's soul imprint had already mentioned that it was possible to get all the answers by going to the place where the Well of the Sun was supposed to be, which was the same place that the Tree of Eternity had fallen. For Lin Li, the most important thing now was how to defeat Osric and finally gain control of the entire Sky Castle. Even though Osric had lost his body, souls of sanctuary powerhouses were almost indestructible. Lin Li could probably only truly destroy Osric's soul when he reached the Immortal King's strength. However, with Lin Li's current strength, it was almost impossible to destroy Osric's soul even if he had the help of the 7 pieces of the debris of the stars. In the blink of an eye, Osric's mana hand that had invaded Lin Li's domain world vanished under the colorful storm. However, that did not mean that Lin Li had obtained victory. The mana hand contained Osric's spiritual imprint, and even after being reduced to mana, it still existed independently in Lin Li's domain world, destroying the entire structure of the domain world like a virus. In the face of the penetrative and pervasive erosion of mana, Lin Li had no choice but to summon the power of the 7 pieces of the debris of the stars, after which numerous rays of light swept through the sky and the ground. It was a contest on a whole other level, where strength had become secondary, and what mattered the most was each party's experience. Even though it did not seem too intense on the surface, it was just as thrilling as a toe-to-toe battle. Osric's experience was definitely rich and incomparable to ordinary people's, as he had killed plenty of powerhouses. However, Lin Li was not that inferior to him. Although he had only been in this world for a few years, and had not experienced many actual battles, he had other ways to gain experience. The Dragon Crystal of the Dragon of Destruction, Azardus, contained a lifetime of battle experience. Likewise, the Magical Crystal of the top powerhouse of the Abyss, Balak, also contained lifetime experience of Balak, the ancient deity. Most importantly, the control crystal of the sky castle that Lin Li had obtained allowed him to gain a huge amount of knowledge and experience from it, even though he did not know the origin of the control crystal. With such a rich accumulation of knowledge, there would not be a great gap between them, even though Lin Li might not have more experience than Osric. What really gave Lin Li a headache was the indestructible nature of Osric's soul, which left him with no means to attack. If Lin Li were far stronger than Osric, he could seal Osric's soul. However, the problem now was that Osric was the stronger one, and Lin Li was already having a hard time resisting his attacks. He obviously did not have any remaining power or energy to seal Osric's soul. Go to hell. So what if you've obtained those things? I want to let him know that he had made the wrong choice. Osric's anger was clearly not just directed at Lin Li, but mostly at the Immortal King's unfairness. He roared angrily and erupted with an even greater power. With this terrifying power, Osric broke straight into Lin Li's domain world with only one goal, and that was to kill Lin Li. He no longer cared about the control crystal. Those who defied and despised him had to die. Under the pressure of Osric, Lin Li's domain world was already swaying. This time, the entire domain world collapsed, and a massive wound had appeared in the sky. The ground was shaking and collapsing. Faced with such a sudden change, Lin Li did not panic in the slightest, and suddenly raised his hand to release an emerald green seed. It was the seed of eternity of the undead world. As the tree fused into the space of the domain world, a patch of green suddenly appeared on the ground in the center of Lin Li's domain world. Immediately afterwards, it grew at an extremely fast pace. In the blink of an eye, a huge tree appeared in the middle of the world, and its roots spread all over the earth, while its canopy seemed to support the sky. It was the legendary Tree of Eternity, but in Lin Li's domain world, it was just an illusion created by the power of the Tree of Eternity. However, the power of the Tree of Eternity was extremely massive. Even if it was just a small portion of the power of the Tree of Eternity, it was enough to support Lin Li's domain world and make it stable. As the Tree of Eternity appeared, the large wounds were healed in a split second, and the entire domain world immediately became extremely stable. Under the power of the Tree of Eternity, Osric's mana, which had invaded Lin Li's world domain, had its spiritual imprint removed in the blink of an eye. It was then integrated into Lin Li's world domain and became the power of the world. Seeing the change in Lin Li's world domain, Osric was boiling with fury because he knew that he had fallen into Lin Li's trap again. Under the protection of the Tree of Eternity, Lin Li's domain world almost became a real world. Unlike the Immortal King's domain world, it turned into a huge, solid cage for Osric, who had broken into it. However, at this moment, Osric was not flustered at all despite being infuriated. After all, the power of his realm would allow him to break the Tree of Eternity's protection over the domain world easily. Of course, the easiest method was to kill the creator of the domain world. As soon as the creator died, the world would vanish. Hence, when Lin Li's world was still changing, Osric flew straight towards Lin Li without pausing. However, just as Osric was about to reach Lin Li did not panic. Instead, he smirked mockingly. Before Osric realized what Lin Li's smirk meant, a huge black hole suddenly appeared in the domain world. The black hole was right in front of Osric, and a powerful and irresistible attraction emerged from it, pulling Osric into the black hole while he was charging forwards. The abyssal passage. Osric felt a familiar aura from the black hole. It was actually from the depths of the endless abyss. He immediately stopped and retreated. Although Osric had swept through the endless abyss countless times during the Dark Age, he was just a spiritual existence now, and could not quite resist the binding force of the abyss on his soul. Once he was sucked in, it would be difficult for him to get out of it again. The black hole that led to the endless abyss was forcibly opened up by Lin Li, who managed to do so by using the impact that the power of the Tree of Eternity had on the world laws. Besides, that was the only solution that he could come up with to deal with Osric for the time being. An indestructible soul was the most annoying thing to deal with, and once Osric's soul was placed in the endless abyss, it would probably be impossible for him to escape in less than 1,000 years. Lin Li took painstaking efforts to lay such a trap. How could he allow Osric to escape easily? Under his manipulation, the black hole immediately became even larger. It seemed like a monster's mouth that tried to swallow Osric, who kept retreating. "I won't let you off." With a roar of indignation and anger, the massive black hole vanished. At the same time, Osric's figure also disappeared. Although he could not destroy Osric directly, Lin Li believed that in a few hundred years, Osric would no longer pose a threat to him, even if he managed to regain his body and leave the endless abyss. Finally, everything calmed down, and the 7 pieces of the debris of the stars and the Seed of Eternity broke free from the domain world. Lin Li returned to the ground after he put it away. On the other hand, Archbishop Martin and the rest fell to the ground. After having had a close shave with death, they looked dumbfounded. Lin Li did not care about them. Instead, He walked straight to the control panel in the center where Osric's body had completely eroded and collapsed. The Divine King battle robe was spread on the ground, with some black ashes that could be vaguely seen beneath it. On the control panel, the bizarre magical crystal glistened in the groove, while powerful mana waves emanated from it. Clearly, it had devoured a large amount of mana from Osric. However, the function of the magical crystal was merely to trigger the mana to leave Osric's body, and its devouring ability was only mediocre. If the magical crystal could really devour all of Osric's mana, it would probably be about the same as the control crystal. Lin Li reached his hand out without hesitation and removed the magical crystal from the groove of the control panel. The magical crystal that had put Osric through massive suffering actually remained extremely calm in Lin Li's hand. After putting away the magical crystal, Lin Li finally took out the real control crystal and slowly placed it on the control panel. This time, no one came out to disturb Lin Li, and he managed to place the control crystal in the groove of the control panel smoothly. Countless complicated golden mageths began moving towards the entire control panel. The control crystal in the groove seemed to have also been triggered by a sudden power as bright dazzling rays of light emerged from it like from the sun. As the control crystal changed, Lin Li's mental strength that was attached to the control crystal was immediately magnified, engulfing every corner of the Sky Castle and penetrating it. Lin Li could clearly sense that he had now become the master of the Sky Castle, and all of its secrets appeared in his mind clearly. However, Lin Li could also feel that his current strength seemed to be somewhat lacking, and he needed to get stronger to fully control the Sky Castle. At present, he could only control it a little like a child playing with a big sword. Picking it up was one thing, and swinging it well and gracefully was another. He needed to have a certain power that would match it. Lin Li secretly estimated that he would only be able to control the Sky Castle with ease when his strength reached a level like Osric's. Although he was already the true owner of the Sky Castle, he was still unable to use the full power of it. Although he found it a pity, Lin Li was not that bothered by it. After all, the Sky Castle now belonged to him, and it was only a matter of time before he could master it completely. Moreover, Lin Li was confident that it would not take him long to reach that level at the rate that his strength was improving. If it was someone else, they would probably take hundreds or even thousands of years to advance from level 26 to level 28. However, Lin Li was different. He only took a few years to advance from a mage apprentice to the sanctuary realm that he was in now. The insurmountable gap in the eyes of others was not a problem for him at all. Lin Li familiarized himself with the operations that he could use at this stage and began issuing orders for the Sky Castle. The previous destruction of the 36 double realm psychic towers had left the Sky City in a mess. Since the Sky Castle now belonged to Lin Li, he naturally had to clean it up. With the issue of Lin Li's order, the doors of the heavy 4 underground warehouses, distributed in the 4 different areas of the Sky Castle, were slowly opened. Next, a batch of alchemy puppets walked out of the respective underground warehouses in an orderly manner and began cleaning the Sky Castle up. The alchemy puppets could all fetch a high price in Anril, yet they had become janitors here. If Archbishop Martin and the others were to see them, they would probably die of jealousy. Master Flick, congratulations on finally gaining control of the Sky Castle. Archbishop Martin stepped forward and congratulated Lin Li sincerely. Through Osric's appearance just now and the shocking changes that had happened to the magical crystal that Lin Li had taken out again, Archbishop Martin could already guess what happened even though he knew nothing about it before. After congratulating Lin Li, Archbishop Martin was secretly emotional. He thought that Lin Li had such an amazing plan for the exploration of the Sky Castle this time. At the thought that the Immortal King's Sky Castle and the treasures belonged to Lin Li alone now, Archbishop Martin couldn't help but feel bitter even though he had always been close to Lin Li. If the Brilliant Shrine had such a Sky Castle, congratulations, Master Flick, for acquiring the Immortal King's Sky Castle. In the future, the Tower of Dusk will certainly have a position in Anril that no one can reach easily. At this point, Donald had no choice but to offer his compliments in hopes that Lin Li would not abandon him after having made use of him. Deep down, Donald was of course extremely jealous. It was the Immortal King's Sky Castle, the most powerful magical weapon that the High Elves relied on to rule over Anril. If the Rotterdam Kingdom could have a similar Sky Castle, it probably would not be a problem for them to rule over Anril. However, Donald was well aware that he could not show the slightest hint of jealousy yet, as the relationship between the Rotterdam Kingdom and the Tower of Dusk was strained, and Lin Li could easily get a hold on them before destroying them. A sanctuary powerhouse who controlled a Sky Castle was not to be trifled with, and was someone whom not anyone could contend with. Alright, I've already achieved my agenda for the expedition this time. Everyone, will you be returning to Anril after this, or do you have other plans in mind? Clearly, Lin Li was asking them to leave. After all, the teams from the Rotterdam Kingdom and the brilliant shrine had already found what they were looking for. Now, even the entire Sky Castle belonged to Lin Li, and everything that was left in it belonged to him. He obviously wouldn't let the people from the Rotterdam Kingdom and the brilliant shrine continue exploring. Being old and wise, Archbishop Martin and Donald knew even without Lin Li's reminder that they could not expect to get anything more from the Sky Castle. At this juncture, they finally figured out why the Tower of Dusk's team was so generous in the distribution of benefits when they were discussing the matter of cooperation previously. Well, since the entire Sky Castle already belonged to Lin Li, why would he let them continue to take his belongings? Yeah, thanks to Masterful's help this time, we managed to find the crown. Otherwise, we might not have been able to do so at all. After thanking Lin Li, Archbishop Martin apologetically said, "However, before I leave, I have one more request, Masterful. Could you fulfill it?" "What's the matter?" Lin Li knew that under such circumstances, the people of the teams from the Rotterdam Kingdom and the Brilliant Shrine probably would not make any requests that were overboard. Hence, he did not mind it. "We've had a dangerous journey during the exploration of this Sky Castle. Flick, since you've already mastered the Sky Castle, I wonder if you can let us take a tour around this Sky Castle that's famous in history?" Archbishop Martin asked embarrassedly. After all, people like Archbishop Martin and the others had not managed to watch the war at the end of the Dark Age. To them, the Sky Castle had always existed in the myths and legends. Although they had fortunately stepped into the Sky Castle this time, they had to go through a dangerous and arduous journey. Hence, they did not have the time, and were not even in the mood to admire the Sky Castle. Although Lin Li was a little surprised by Archbishop Martin's request, he could understand his reasons for it. Hence, he nodded, and said, "Archbishop Martin, you're being too polite. Everyone has contributed to my success in acquiring this Sky Castle. In this case, I will take you guys on a tour around the Sky Castle." Of course, when he said that he was taking Archbishop Martin and the others on a tour, Lin Li was actually very curious. Although he could gain a thorough and detailed understanding of the Sky Castle, it was, after all, not as spectacular as when he saw it with his own eyes. Moreover, Lin Li actually sensed through the control crystal that the Sky Castle was actually not perfect, either, perhaps because it was too old, or for some other reasons. For example, when Ozark barged in back then, he caused some parts of the Sky Castle to be damaged to a certain extent, and they could only function again after being repaired. Lin Li shut down the magic traps and magic gears in the Sky Castle, and led the expedition team out of the central tower. They began exploring the buildings along a street. While doing so, Lin Li even considered revamping the Sky Castle. Although the Sky Garden of the Supreme Council was not as powerful as the Sky Castle, it had turned into a Sky Castle that was completely suitable for being manipulated by humans after years of modification. If the two clashed, the power that the Supreme Council's Sky Garden could exert would definitely be much higher than the Immortal King's Sky Castles. In Lin Li's plan, the Sky Castle would be the base and foundation of the Tower of Dusk in the future, just like the Sky Garden of the Supreme Council. Hence, making modifications to this Sky Castle almost seemed like an imperative task. After all, Lin Li could not stay in the Sky Castle all the time, and he would still have to rely on the people of the Tower of Dusk to control the Sky Castle in the future. Of course, the revamp and modifications had to be done very carefully, and if they accidentally ruined the Sky Castle, they would be in huge trouble. Fortunately, Lin Li had now gained the recognition of the 3 arbitrators in the Supreme Council, who valued him highly. It should not be a problem for them to alter the data of the Sky Castle. At this moment, the Sky Castle had already been cleaned up by the alchemy puppets, and the entire Sky Castle now looked brand new. It was a far cry from the shabby appearance it had when they first entered. The 36 towers were distributed in various parts of the city, and the double realm psychic towers that the expedition team had turned into debris were cleaned up and recycled by the alchemy puppets. Each tower was now glowing with a faint magical light, making them look extremely majestic against the void in the background. Lin Li found the destruction of the double realm psychic towers to be a pity because he would have to kill a massive number of beings in order to rebuild them. Not only was Lin Li not that cruel and ruthless, it would also be impossible to build as many as 36 double realm psychic towers even if he slaughtered all the creatures in Anral. However, to Lin Li's relief, none of the 36 realm beads were damaged at all, and they could all be embellished in the Black Front Fortress. That could more or less make up for the loss of the double realm psychic towers. Of course, even if the Black Front Fortress could compare to the double realm psychic towers, it would not be able to compare to the psychic array formed by the 36 double realm psychic towers. The High Elves called the Sky Castle their most powerful weapon not just because it had 36 magic towers, but because they also had numerous other magical weapons. In addition to the magic towers, many of them were normally hidden underground, but just the ones that were exposed were enough to shock Archbishop Martin and the others who visited the Sky Castle. Is this the legendary Thunder God's spear? Under the lead of Lin Li, Archbishop Martin and the others arrived in front of a building that was similar to an altar. They could recognize the building from its appearance and had identified it using the historical data they had read. Although it was called the Thunder God's spear, there was actually no spear, and it was just a metaphor for it being the most powerful weapon used by the Thunder God. The altar was about a third of the height of a magic tower, and it was similar to a pyramid-shaped stone platform. The entire altar was covered in complicated mageths. Due to the fact that they had not been activated, they were merely emitting a faint glow of mana. Although the altar seemed a little unassuming, Archbishop Martin and others who were familiar with the historical data did not dare to take it lightly at all. Legend had it that during the war at the end of the Dark Age, the High Elves had once manipulated a sky castle to launch a sneak attack on a city that the rebellion forces occupied. Back then, the sky castle had activated the Thunder God's spear, and bolts of lightning enveloped the entire city, turning hundreds of thousands of people and tens of thousands of rebels into ashes in just a few moments. Although the power of the Thunder God's spear might not be much to sanctuary powerhouses like Lin Li, it was definitely a destructive magical weapon in the eyes of Archbishop Martin, Donald, and the others. If such a sky castle suddenly appeared in the royal capital of the Rotterdam Kingdom, with the Thunder God's spear activated, the entire capital and the royal family of the Rotterdam Kingdom would be wiped out. That would be a huge tragedy for the Rotterdam Kingdom. At the thought of such a terrifying scene, Donald was so frightened that his face turned pale. Deep down, he also confirmed something, and that it was definitely a force that they could not afford to offend. At this moment, he couldn't help but feel thankful and somewhat fortunate that he had changed his attitude in time. Otherwise, if he had provoked such an enemy, the Rotterdam Kingdom would probably have been not far from downfall. However, upon further inspection, Archbishop Martin and the others gradually became used to the fact that even though powerful magical weapons, like the Thunder God's spear, were not rampant everywhere in the Sky Castle, there were definitely many of them. Besides, other than the large-scale lethal weapons, there were still many weapons that were targeted at powerhouses, one of which was named the Divine Punishment, which even the sanctuary powerhouses dared not contend with head-on. Of course, Lin Li did not tell Archbishop Martin and the others that although there were many magical weapons in the Sky Castle, he could only use a few of them freely. For example, Lin Li could not fully exert the power of the Divine Punishment, which was said to be able to kill the sanctuary powerhouses. He could only use it at full power when he reached Ozric's level and gained full control of the Sky Castle. Apart from the external weapons, there was a large number of weapons and facilities used for the defense of the Sky Castle to prevent anyone from invading the Sky Castle. The strongest was naturally the conquering mageth that Lin Li had seen on the diagrams in the beginning. It could cause the inhabitants of the Sky Castle to turn into godlike existences. It had a similar effect to the ice and fire natural domain that Lin Li had placed in the Eternal Furnace. However, it was far stronger than the ice and fire natural domain. However, Lin did not introduce the conquering mageth to Archbishop Martin and the others. Since they did not recognize it themselves, why would he go to the trouble of telling them? In addition, during the visit, Lin Li also discovered that the conquering mageth was somewhat flawed because of the fact that it had been turned into a psychic array. The previous time he had explored the Sky Castle and discovered the psychic array, Lin Li thought that someone had used the conquering mageth as the basis for laying out a psychic array that shared the same mana source with it. He had felt that it was an amazing design, but after observing it carefully now, Lin Li realized that although the design was ingenious enough, the conquering mageth had still been inevitably affected. Be it the conquering mageth or the psychic array, they were already in the guru level realm, and the slightest error would lead to devastating consequences. From Ozric's behavior in the Sky Castle, Lin Li reckoned that the psychic array had probably been added by Ozric later. Otherwise, given the Immortal King's abilities, he probably wouldn't have made such a mistake. Of course, Ozric's level was also extremely high. Although the psychic array had a certain impact on the conquering mageth, it didn't cause any unmanageable consequences. After all, although the conquering mageth could not be used now, the damage done was not massive. Lin Li believed that he wouldn't need much time to repair them with his current abilities. However, as the most important facility of the entire Sky Castle, the conquering mageth likewise could not be operated by Lin Li now. Even if it were restored and repaired, Lin Li would need to gain complete control of the Sky Castle in order to truly bring out its full power. Although Archbishop Martin and the others did not know about such a terrifying existence as the conquering mageth at the end of the day, they were learned and knowledgeable especially since they had done plenty of research before going to the Sky Castle. They could recognize some of the facilities in the Sky Castle. Holy, blessing of holy light. Is this the blessing of holy light? Archbishop Martin couldn't help but exclaim when he reached a square. The square was not very large, and there were complicated maguettes on the ground, and a facility which resembled a fountain in the center. However, it looked just like a sculpture. The entire combination was a maguette array, the blessing of holy light. It could emit pure and powerful power of light, and even the brilliant shrine could not come up with a maguette array like this. One of the two greatest effects of the blessing of holy light maguette array was treatment, which was said to have the power to bring the dead back to life. Even a crippled person would be able to restore his limb that he had lost under the holy light. The other effect, if nicely put, was summoning. However, it was actually a very evil ability that was similar to enchantment in Lin Li's opinion. Under the power of holy light, it would be able to permanently turn an enemy into an ally. Everyone knew that the power of light had the ability to purify all evil and filth, and the so-called purification was actually annihilation, where the enemy's body and soul were burned together with holy light. However, the blessing of holy light magic array had the ability to turn evil beings into the devotees of holy light. In Lin Li's opinion, that ability was actually just the same as giving the Death Knights divine power. However, compared to giving the Death Knights divine power, the blessing of holy light was much stronger and faster. Once the holy light shone at someone, they would turn into a part of the caster's team. If a group of enemies invaded the Sky Castle, and the blessing of holy light maguette array was suddenly triggered, the enemies that were originally menacing would suddenly burst into tears under the baptism of holy light. Not only would it cause the power of the Sky Castle to increase, it would also be a big blow to the enemy. To the people of the Brilliant Shrine, the blessing of holy light maguette array had always existed only in legends. The successive popes and prophets of the Brilliant Shrine had all tried to recreate the maguette array, but none of them had succeeded. Otherwise, Anral would have probably become the diocese of the Brilliant Shrine long ago. Hence, even Archbishop Martin, who was already a bit numb, became excited immediately after seeing the blessing of holy light maguette array. He wished he could dig it up and bring it away. Unfortunately, Archbishop Martin was well aware that if it were in the past, he probably would have been able to do it, but the Sky Castle already belonged to Lin Li now. It seemed that when he returned, he had to rack his brains to think of a way to make Master Philip join the Brilliant Shrine. Archbishop Martin secretly made up his mind. In Archbishop Martin's heart, Lin Li was probably just as important to the Brilliant Shrine as Pope Rosario was. Lin Li had holy light, which could directly enhance the strength of the followers of holy light. If the Brilliant Shrine could get Lin Li's help, there would definitely be a huge increase in the overall strength of the Brilliant Shrine, which was something that even Pope Rosario could not bring about. Without the hindrance of the magic traps and magic gears, Lin Li managed to quickly lead the expedition team through the Sky Castle. Of course, as the tour progressed, Archbishop Martin, Donald and the others went from feeling envious to being jealous, and eventually numb. They simply could not imagine how powerful the Tower of Dusk would become and how high their status would rise with Lin Li's acquisition of such a Sky Castle. Archbishop Martin and Donald were ready to take their leave, but Lin Li did not respond immediately to their bidding of farewell. Instead, he seemed to have slipped deep in thought. It turned out that while Lin Li was showing them around, he had also been observing the entire Sky Castle with his mental strength to explore places that were invisible to the outside world. However, Lin Li suddenly discovered just now that his mental strength seemed to have been hindered by a force somewhere in the Sky Castle. Lin Li was now the master of the Sky Castle, and there should not have been any secrets that were kept from him at all. Besides, the place where his mental strength had been blocked did not comply to him, the master, at all. Clearly, that power had a higher authority than his. Lin Li gained control of the Sky Castle through the control crystal, and if there was someone who had higher authority than him, it would probably be the Immortal King, who had built the Sky Castle. That made him feel extremely nervous, even though there had been various signs along the way that showed that the Immortal King had some kind of unknown connection with him. No one could be certain if the connection was good or not. Although Lin Li had had some indirect contact with the Immortal King, he still could not figure out the Immortal King's attitude towards him. Did he treat Lin Li as a successor or a pawn? Or did he simply see Lin Li as a toy for easing his boredom? Lin Li did not acquire the Tower of Dusk with the intention of making it a lodging for himself and the members of the Tower of Dusk. Instead, he wanted it to be a powerful weapon that he could use when sealing the Great Spastime Rift. Hence, to him, it was not a good thing to have no control over such an existence. It was just like a ticking time bomb that would blow him to pieces at any time. After snapping back to his senses, Lin Li apologetically said to Archbishop Martin and the others, I'm sorry, when I arrived, I realized that there's a place that I have to explore and check. I will not see you off then. Archbishop Martin had planned to talk to Lin Li about the latter visiting the brilliant shrine again, but an idea suddenly popped up in his mind, and he said, Masterfully, you're standing on ceremony with me. Do you need our help with anything? If you don't mind us being in the way, why don't we accompany you? Archbishop Martin's idea was very simple. He just wanted to seize every opportunity to get closer to Lin Li. Even though he would have to pay a price, it would definitely be worth it if he could obtain some benefits from Lin Li. Before Lin Li could even answer, Donald immediately interjected when he heard Archbishop Martin's words. Yeah, Masterfully, thank you for taking care of us throughout the journey this time. If there's anything we can help you with, please let us know. Donald did not expect to get anything from Lin Li. He just hoped that Lin Li wouldn't mind the previous conflicts that they had, and that he wouldn't suddenly attack the Rotterdam Kingdom with the Sky Castle. They're actually so eager to vie with each other to be my cannon fodder. Lin Li was slightly stunned when he saw how sincere Archbishop Martin and Donald were. He felt that it would be inappropriate to turn them down. Hence, he nodded and said, all right then, let's go take a look together. Lin Li once again brought the members of the two forces back to the center of the Sky Castle. But after using his mental strength to observe for a while, he discovered that the place where his mental strength had been blocked was not actually inside the Sky Castle, but rather at the bottom. Moreover, there was no passage in the Sky Castle that could lead to that mysterious spot. They were faced with yet another issue. There was an endless void outside the Sky Castle, and the nether storm was continuously brewing outside the canopy. If they were to leave the protection of the canopy and go to the bottom of the Sky Castle, they would be facing a huge risk. Even a true sanctuary powerhouse like Lin Li would not be able to last long in the void, let alone ordinary people. If they encountered the nether storm, they would face the danger of falling. Although Lin Li was wearing a space robe and could move across short distances, he dared not use it in the void unless he had the strength of the immortal king. Otherwise, he might accidentally fall into the nether storm, and that would be courting death. When they heard this, Archbishop Martin and Donald immediately got caught in a dilemma. They were legendary powerhouses, but in the face of the nether storm, they were no different from ants. Even without the nether storm, they would only be able to stay in the void for a few seconds at most, and every second meant great danger. Well, why did the high elves build buildings down there? Besides, there isn't any passage to get there either. Archbishop Martin was feeling somewhat regretful. He had taken the initiative to offer his help, but he had not expected such an outcome. If things went awry, he might even end up losing his life too. Donald, on the other hand, was just saying those words superficially, and did not actually plan to put in any effort at all. He mainly wanted to see if there were any hidden treasures. After hearing that Lin Li wanted to go to that place through the endless void, he immediately wanted to back out. It would have been alright to back out if he hadn't offered to help. However, he had offered his help, and if he went back on his word, he would really offend Lin Li. After being conflicted for a while, Donald said, Masterfully, since that building is built at the bottom of the Sky Castle, it probably doesn't have an important function. Why don't we go take a look another time after you've brought the Sky Castle back to Anril? Although Donald was just making excuses, his words actually made sense. They were now being surrounded by the endless void, and it would naturally be dangerous to go to the bottom of the Sky Castle. However, if Lin Li were to move the Sky Castle back to Anril, there would be no need to worry about the nether storm. By then, even an ordinary archmage would probably be able to fly over and check using the levitation spell. However, Lin Li had thought about many other issues. Although it was true that he wouldn't have to worry about the nether storm if he moved the Sky Castle back to Anril, he couldn't help but be worried about what exactly was hidden in that place. If an existence like Osric was brought to Anril, for example, it would bring about a huge disaster to Anril. Of course, Lin Li was not a benevolent person, and he wouldn't care about the lives and deaths of irrelevant people. However, Lin Li couldn't help but be worried about the hidden existence that affected his control of the Sky Castle. Hence, if he brought the Sky Castle back to Anril, he would pave the way for someone else. Therefore, although the endless void outside contained infinite dangers, Lin Li still hoped to resolve this unstable factor there and then. If it was really beyond his ability to resolve it, he would rather give up on the Sky Castle than be blown into pieces later. The two of you, I didn't expect it to be so dangerous there. Since your teams have already suffered major losses in this expedition, I think you'd better return. I'll come up with a solution for this matter on my own, Lin Li said to Archbishop Martin and Donald. Although Lin Li said that, they dared not take it seriously. God knew if they would be targeted. Hence, Archbishop Martin and Donald, who had been a little hesitant, immediately righteously said, Masterfully, it's wrong for you to say that. Thanks to your care and help along the way, we managed to find what we wanted. Now that you need help, how can we just leave now? Lin Li secretly laughed, and after saying a few polite words, he began thinking about how he could go down there. The simplest method was to walk to the edge of the sky castle and jump straight down. However, the simplest method meant that he would face the greatest risk. Even with Lin Li's current strength, it was impossible for him to go down into the area in the endless void. If he were to encounter another storm, he would definitely die. Using his mental strength, Lin Li carefully explored the interior of the sky castle several times, and finally picked out a path. Although it would not lead straight to the bottom of the sky castle, he would be able to reach the spot that was the closest to it. As long as he walked out of that space, he just had to stay in the endless void for a few seconds to reach the bottom. Of course, even then, it did not mean that there was no longer any risk. Even if he was fortunate enough not to encounter any nether storms, that environment was not something that ordinary legendary powerhouses could stay long in. If one took that path, the candidates who could really go down with him would probably have to be at least at the peak of the legendary level, and they would also have to be protected by Lin Li. However, Archbishop Martin and Donald had no objections to this solution. Their teams had already suffered huge losses, and it would be best to keep their members from taking risks again. They offered to stay only because they wanted to leave a good impression on Lin Li. They did not really want to lose their underlings. Likewise, it was impossible for everyone from the Tower of Dusk to go down there. Hence, Lin Li chose Connorus and his two undead servants, Ufalusi and Norfaler. Of course, in reality, the power that Lin Li could bring was not just the three of them. For example, he could summon the tender elemental Wyrm Xiaohua, the Lord of Nightmares who had been kept in the summoning lamp, and the Lord Devourer, Garl. They were no weaker than the three he would be bringing out on the surface. Besides, they did not need Lin Li to protect them conscientiously. After making the necessary preparations, Lin Li brought his three men, Archbishop Martin and Donald, into the Sky Castle again. They walked along the decided route and went deeper into the Sky Castle. There were no doors that seemed to lead to the outside world from the passageway inside the Sky Castle. After all, the chaotic environment outside would destroy the Sky Castle if it only relied on one door. Furthermore, it would be easy for enemies to sneak into the Sky Castle through the door if there were any outside the Void Channel. However, the lack of doors would not be an issue. As the owner of the Sky Castle, Lin Li was extremely clear about every nook and cranny within the Sky Castle, excluding the area that his mental strength couldn't reach. The place they had reached was one of the rooms at the base of the Sky Castle. This room was used to store magical weapons like the crystal cannons. Hence, it also had one launch pad inside. Although it was just a launch pad, it definitely had no problems accommodating something the size of one man. As it was the strongest battle fortress, there were many launch pads and magical weapons beneath the Sky Castle. The room which Lin Li brought the men to had a shelf of dragon cannons, a weapon that was created from the integration of alchemy and mageths. Unlike the crystal cannons, that relied on compressed mana in their attacks, the dragon cannons combined the mana from the mana source with mageths and alchemy arrays in its attacks to create an even more powerful attack. The skills to create a magical weapon, as complicated as the dragon cannons, had since been lost in this era. One could only find shadows of the craftsmanship in the ancient legends. Hence, although Archbishop Martin and Donald had been numbed by the treasures in other rooms, they could not help but drool at the sight of the dragon cannons. After the Sky Castle entered the endless void, the launch pad would cast a shield. It was akin to fixing window panes on a window frame to prevent the nether storm from destroying the interior of the Sky Castle. As the owner of the Sky Castle, Lin Li naturally had his way of lifting the shield to let himself and the others leave. Lin Li observed the situation outside through the shield in front of the launch pad. A gust of nether storm swirled past his face and made the firm shield tremble vigorously. Not to mention Archbishop Martin, even Lin Li could not help but shiver at the impact of the nether storm. He knew that its force was not something he could withstand. Lin Li had brought everyone to the space closest to the bottom of the Sky Castle. It would only take them a few seconds to fly to the destination. However, as his mental strength was obstructed, Lin Li could not use it to assess the situation as comprehensively as he hoped. He even had to make preparations for a spontaneous retreat. After all, Lin Li was unsure whether they could immediately enter the space even if they arrived at the destination. If they were unable to resolve the problems in a short time, it would definitely be a dangerous choice to stay in the endless void for long. Lin Li initially planned to take his time to observe to look for patterns within the nether storm, such as internals and directions. However, the nether storm was like a child who was not held back by anyone in the endless void. There might be a chance for it not to appear, and a chance for it to appear multiple times continuously within a few seconds. It seemed like there was no pattern at all. Although he had decided that this place would allow him to travel to the bottom of the sky castle within the shortest amount of time, the sight of the irregular nether storms forced Lin Li to feel helpless deep inside. Archbishop Martin and Donald were extremely clear about their capabilities. They were all right to participate in adventures, but not in giving their lives away. Yet, they were too ashamed to take back their promise of accompanying Lin Li there. Hence, the sight of Lin Li's hesitation sparked joy within the hearts of Archbishop Martin and Donald. Of course, they were not daring enough to demand a retreat. They could only turn their wishes in the form of suggestions to convince Lin Li to give up on the venture temporarily. However, it was as though Lin Li was deaf to the suggestion of Archbishop Martin and Donald. His gaze was fixed outside the launch pad intently. He knew that it would mean trouble if they were to head out. Although he did not like the idea of playing with his own life, he felt that there would be a greater danger to the Tower of Dusk if he were to leave an unknown threat in the Sky Castle. Archbishop Martin and Donald smiled awkwardly. When they saw that Lin Li did not reply to them, they stopped giving him advice and waited for Lin Li's reply in trepidation. Lin Li did not let them wait too long. "The rest of you please step back a little," instructed Lin Li as he turned to face the rest. All right," stammered Archbishop Martin and Donald in joy. They turned to walk towards the door, but they stopped when they saw Connorus and the rest. It was then that they realized that Lin Li's command was to step back and not retreat. Could this become a path of no return? Although both of them were deeply unwilling, they knew they had to stop. Lin Li did not care about how Archbishop Martin and Donald were behaving. After all, their abilities as legendary mages were too limited. Their presence did not matter to him. He got up close to a dragon cannon and pushed it to the mouth of the launch pad. This sight confused Archbishop Martin and Donald. The dragon cannon had been painted as a formidable weapon in the legends with the claim that it could collapse a whole mountain. Yet, what would become of it in the endless void? After pushing the dragon cannon to the mouth of the launch pad, Lin Li whipped out a firm world domain that was made up of the 7 pieces of the debris of the stars. He enclosed the whole room with the world domain before using his mental strength to control the magical crystal to lift the shield at the launch pad. Please do not belittle the void for its name. Apart from the unruly nether storm, the void had all sorts of particles with vigorous energy that would cause great damage to both humans and infrastructure. The layer outside the sky castle was the very rare space sand that could withstand the erosion by the violent particles. Yet, even a mortal king did not lavish the space sand indoors. The eroding impact of the particles on the construction was just a part of it. These fellas were like naturally chosen leaders that would trigger the magical elements within the sky castle and turn the entire sky castle into a powder keg. As Lin Li had already viewed the sky castle as his own, he did not dare to commit any irreversible mistake here. That was why he was so careful. If there weren't the nether storm, the world domain would be enough to protect the architecture from the erosion of the energy particles. After casting the world domain and lifting the shield at the launch pad, Lin Li retrieved a legendary level crystal from his ring of endless storm and put it at the mana source of the dragon cannon. Although Lin Li had never used a dragon cannon before, his knowledge as a guru helped him find a way to activate it very easily. Very quickly, a halo surrounded that legendary level crystal. Its mana flashed as it traveled along the alchemy array and mageths. Very quickly, it lit the entire dragon cannon. The dragon cannon that had been placed in the room for thousands of years finally displayed its hideous appearance. Its brightly lit alchemy array and mageths were like a perfect work of art that gave the ancient dragon cannon a mysterious aura. What followed was a loud explosion as a menacing ball of fire shot into the endless void. After it flew out of the sky castle, the ball expanded and filled up all of their vision. Although there was no sound of explosion, everyone could sense tremors within the castle. That young sanctuary level mage would be a wastrel if he were to cast the dragon cannon out of curiosity about its immense powers. Archbishop Martin's heart could not help but ache at the sight of how Lin Li used the dragon cannon. A legendary level magical crystal was definitely needed to activate the incredible power within the dragon cannon. That one dragon cannon had used up 1/10 of the mana within the crystal. This meant that the crystal had fallen from its original legendary level strength. Although the team from Brilliant Shrine and Rotterdam had reaped significant rewards from this exploration, the legendary level magical crystal was still no doubt a precious treasure. The sight of Lin Li incapacitating such a gem without any hint of hesitation gave Archbishop Martin and Donald a great urge to give an immediate lashing to that spendthrift. However, Lin Li paid no attention to the depleted mana within the legendary level crystal. His sight was fixed on the ball of fire. His gaze did not move even after that big explosion. It missed. Although Archbishop Martin felt extreme heartache from Lin Li's wasteful act, he knew that testing the impact of the dragon cannon was not Lin Li's sole intention. Hence, when he saw Lin Li fixing his gaze at the distance, He walked forward curiously to look outside the sky castle at the endless void. Archbishop Martin got a shock of his life when he saw what happened outside. The ball of fire was like a piece of magnet that repelled the different nether storms in its surroundings. However, that ball of fire was not a continuous magic, after all. The impact of its explosion did not last too long. With the engulfing forces of the nether storms, the sun-sized ball of fire dissipated very quickly, while those nether storms continued to rage along their new paths. One of the attributes of the nether storm was that it would chase after exogenous energies. This was also why the endless void was a dangerous place even to sanctuary powerhouses. One could not simply avoid nether storms just because he wanted to. No matter how quick and agile a sanctuary powerhouse was, he had to rely on magic to move in the endless void. Yet, the use of magic would transform nether storms into sharks that smelled blood. They would chase after the strand of magic wave until it completely disappeared. It was impossible for one to win against a nether storm in speed. A nether storm could be birthed out of nowhere in the endless void. No one would be able to expect whether a nether storm would come at them while they escaped. And even if Lady Luck prevented a nether storm from appearing in the front, there would be more and more nether storm chasing him from the back. Unless he were to find a place to hide quickly, a sanctuary powerhouse would be tired to death. Only someone as powerful as a mortal king, whose world domain had achieved reality, would be able to activate it to move around the endless void freely. The goal of Lin Li's experiment was to make use of the nature of the nether storm to be attracted to exogenous energy to create a safe but temporary time gap. Understanding that he would need time to travel to and from the sky castle for his followers, Lin Li had been estimating the time needed for the fireballs to delay the nether storm, and where he wanted them to explode. To fulfill this goal, Lin Li was not stingy with his legendary crystals. He only stopped after activating 60 dragon cannons with 6 legendary crystals. Seeing that his efforts in persuading Lin Li not to be a wastrel were in vain, Archbishop Martin finally accepted the fate. What an outrageous wastage of a treasure, he thought as he looked at the powdered crystals beneath the dragon cannon in a daze. As for Donald, although he strove to perfect his relationship with the Tower of Dusk, he knew that he did not have any bonds with the tower. While he felt that it was a waste to use the magical crystals as such, the sight of Lin Li wasting magical crystals was more like a show to him. Of course, Donald knew that the loss of a few legendary level crystals would not mean much to the Tower of Dusk. Hence, he tried to suppress his emotions. However, there was no sign of heartache on Lin Li's face after he turned the legendary crystals into powder. Instead, he relaxed his furrowed brows gradually. He was now certain from his several experiments that he could use the dragon cannons to divert the nether storms and buy time for himself. Archbishop Martin and Master Donald, are the two of you staying here? Or are you coming with me? Asked Lin Li as he loaded crystals into the dragon cannons. He had the confidence to navigate the situation, but was too lazy to explain it to them. Although they were accompanied by a sanctuary powerhouse, they did not have the confidence that the sanctuary powerhouse would care to protect them in crisis. After all, this was a place dangerous even to sanctuary powerhouses. It would be fortunate for them to ensure their own lives. The rest of the men, including Archbishop Martin and Donald, was just like ants to sanctuary powerhouses. But, since the two of them had promised to embark on the adventure with Lin Li, they were more fearful that they would incite hatred within Lin Li if they were to withdraw. Hence, they could only muster all their courage and agree to advance with him. Lin Li could not help but try to suppress his laughter when he heard the unnatural reply from Archbishop Martin and Donald. In reality, Lin Li did not really care about their decision. He was only certain that he would not leave the two people at such a place. Although he was not a generous man, he was not petty enough to find fault with them over such a small matter. But, since Archbishop Martin and Donald insisted on accompanying him, there was nothing for Lin Li to talk about, either. With his new discoveries, Lin Li adjusted the dragon cannons and summoned Demon Gordon. Bam, bam, bam. 3 consecutive balls of fire shot towards the endless void and exploded in different locations. Lin Li brought everyone through the opening into the world domain without any delay. Lin Li immediately experienced the impact of the energy particles when he entered the endless void. Despite being relatively stable due to the help of the debris of the stars, it was still difficult for his world domain to withstand the penetration by the particles. Of course, no one in the world domain had the same realization as Lin Li, because their mental energy was not connected to the world domain. Even so, this did not prevent the rest of their hearts from palpitating. The endless void was infamous to everyone in Anral for being an extremely scary place. After entering the endless void, Lin Li swerved to the bottom of the sky castle and saw that one of the balls of fire had just reached the location of explosion. And, just like what he predicted, the direction of the storms changed upon meeting the balls of fire. Although there were still several storms chasing after them, their speed was greatly decreased. If those explosions were to continue, they would no doubt lure the storms away. Unfortunately, the explosions of the fireballs were not long-lived. Yet, it was a great idea for Lin Li to leave Demon Gordon in the room full of dragon cannons. He would help to launch new fireballs, as long as Lin Li ordered him to do so. Hence, as soon as the 3 fireballs were about to be extinguished, Demon Gordon sent a few more into the void under Lin Li's orders. In this process, the shield at the launch pad swiftly opened and closed under Lin Li's control as well. Despite not having any obstruction from the world domain, the rapid movement of the shield helped to prevent damage to the interior of the castle. The new explosions once again drew the nether storms that were coming in Lin Li's direction away. New nether storms moved towards the explosions as well. Lin Li brought the men to the base of the sky castle with the help of the explosions. It was only now that Lin Li discovered how the place looked. It was the place where his mental strength did not get to meet. What appeared in their view was an inverted tower. Its base was connected to the sky castle with its tip piercing into the endless void. It was as though they were standing upside down. The architectural style of this tower resembled the tower that was situated above the sky castle. The tower's shape looked just like the shadow of that tower. The men had to readjust their positions before they set foot on the ground in front of the tower. As directions were not a concern within the endless void, the men reoriented to the upside-down feeling very quickly, and got to the door of the tower. Masterfully, this door, muttered Archbishop Martin. He knew that the key of this tower was definitely not among the collection of keys, which he gave to Lin Li when Lin Li took over the sky castle. While he had witnessed how the forces from explosions could help to attract the nether storms, he realized that the explosions could only buy them a few seconds of safety. Hence, the sight of the tightly shut door and the nether storms that were coming after them made Archbishop Martin extremely anxious. Furthermore, they did not have the key to the tower. Even if they had all the other materials ready, a dozen seconds would be needed for them to unlock one magical 1000 contraption lock. This amount of time was not a problem elsewhere, but every second would mean danger in the endless void. Of course, Lin Li's inability to open the door was a relief to both Archbishop Martin and Donald, as it meant that they would not need to enter the tower and deal with all the risks it might entail. Then, they would be returning to the sky castle with a trust from Lin Li won at no cost. Yet, there was nothing worth rejoicing for Lin Li. This tower was neither shown in the blueprint of the tower, nor controlled by magical crystals within the sky castle. How could he leave such a mysterious tower in the sky castle without knowing its purpose? This was the dilemma: to immediately retreat, or stay there to figure out ways to unlock the door. It wouldn't be a risk to retreat at this point of time, but if he were to leave the mysterious tower as an unknown, Lin Li was sure that he would never have the confidence to use the castle without worry. That meant that he would need to give up on the sky castle for the time being. However, if he were to stay there, he would be putting all his eggs in a single basket, and have to be prepared to face extremely great risks. Would this mean that he had to give up on the sky castle? Although Lin Li had experienced many close shaves with death, he was not somebody who loved to gamble with his life. Those were the times when Lin Li was forced to take the plunge in light of grave situations. Yet, it was not that Lin Li had no way out. He just had to decide between his life and the sky castle. While he might seem crazy at times, Lin Li was not a true lunatic. After all, he naturally knew which of the two weighed more. Lin Li did not hesitate for too long. He set his heart in a flash. Although the sky castle would be a valuable addition to his organization, it would be useless if he did not have his life to use it. Furthermore, giving up would only be temporary. He would still be able to uncover the mysteries of the tower if he had time to think of a better way to explore it. However, when he was prepared to call for a retreat, Lin Li sensed a unique wave emitting from his ring of endless storm. He immediately sent his mental energy into the ring of endless storm, and discovered that it was coming from a key that had been long forgotten. This key was one of the 3 of Garesko's treasures, which Lin Li received after he had gotten through Tutankhamun's test in the Black Stone Mountains. The 3 relics that Lin Li had received were the Sacred Book of Eternity, the rare magical crystal of the Evilite Tyrant, and this key. According to Tutankhamun, the key that Garesko had left behind was the key to unlock the sky castle. However, Lin Li had never used this key despite reaping huge rewards from his 2 expeditions in the castle. Lin Li had been reading the Book of Eternity almost every day. It had played an irreplaceable role in his advancement into the sanctuary realm. As for the magical crystal of the Evilite Tyrant, it had been transformed into one of Lin Li's rings, which he brought around everywhere. It had been raising his mental strength almost every moment, and had contributed significantly to his progress. This key, however, had not been used from the day Lin Li acquired it. Hence, it had been left in the corner of the Ring of Endless Storm, almost forgotten until today. Find the new street ovals on N. Velben, calm, but this time, When Lin Li got closer to the upside-down tower, a reaction could be observed from this key that seemed to have been left forgotten. This reaction naturally helped Lin Li associate the key with the tower. Could this be the key to unlocking this tower? This thought changed Lin Li's mind. He decided to take the risk to find out whether this key could help to unlock the door of the tower. Lin Li's decision was not an impulsive one. Instead, it was because of the fact that the key had belonged to Garesco. After all, Lin Li still had a mission from Garesco, which was to seal the space cracks within the Anral world. Would Garesco, an existence as invincible as Immortal King, and any other legends, send him to his death with such a great ploy? Although this did not mean that there would not be any danger, it was enough to give Lin Li the courage to take the risk. Master Flick, I see that the nether storms are coming over. Just when Lin Li made up his mind, Donald, who was in the world domain, exclaimed anxiously at the top of his lungs. The appearance of nether storms was unpredictable. They could appear anytime, anywhere as long as they were in the endless void. Lin Li had made use of the impact of the explosions to attract some of the storms away, but now that they were at the base of the sky castle, he realized that the hindrance from the nether storms had reduced greatly. His problem now was how the mana wave from his world domain seemed to be attracting the nether storms in the surroundings like a magnet. What was even more shocking was that it did not just attract a wave of nether storms. Instead, nether storms from all directions were charging towards the world domain. While Lin Li had the ability to overcome one of them, he did not have the confidence to stop himself from being minced into powder due to the combined forces from all of the storms. Hence, this horrific sight made Donald gasp. If he hadn't been within Lin Li's world domain, he would have fled. Lin Li knew now was not the time to linger, but he did not retreat as Donald and Archbishop Martin wished he would. He continued to lead everyone forward, and only stopped when they reached the gate of the tower. Master Flick, there is no time to waste now. Those nether storms are reaching us. Donald shrieked. This situation of life and death was not the time to present himself prim and proper. Unfortunately, there was no chance for him to leave Lin Li's world domain. All he could do was to shriek hysterically. Master Flick, or do you know how to unlock this door? That was Archbishop Martin. While he appeared anxious, he was not as hysterical as Donald. There were just tremors underlying his voice. However, Lin Li did not have the time to provide any comfort to them. He retrieved Garesco's key from his ring of endless storm, a little worriedly, but when he saw the key flopping like fish out of water, he knew that he had made the correct choice. There was no need for Lin Li to say more. He released his hand gently, and let the key fly towards a dent that was located at the center of the door. At the same time, the nether storms from all directions started surging towards them. The storms merged into one humongous storm, and engulfed the men and the entire tower. They vanished from where they were when that enormous nether storms left the upside-down tower. That was dangerous. Archbishop Martin exclaimed fearfully as he wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. He did not expect to find himself in another place. What is this place? Are we inside that tall tower? Donald wondered as he blushed at the thought of losing his cool earlier on. He was trying to divert the topic. Of course, he was just thinking too much. Lin Li and the rest of the men already had their attention on their new surroundings. This place was huge, but it did not seem spacious. There were rows of shelves in the hall, and there were all sorts of magic books on them. It was like a huge and bright library. The silence within it could calm one's breathing. Oh gosh, could this be the royal library that belonged to the High Elves? The men gasped after they saw their surroundings. Although the era when Anral was ruled by the High Elves was also known as the Dark Age, it was no doubt the era when the magic civilization was the most prosperous, as this was Immortal King's sky castle, and he was the driving force of the development of the High Elves. The magic books here had to be related to the High Elves. No, the magic books here did not belong to High Elves. They belonged to humans, exclaimed Lin Li after he walked over to the nearest shelf. He glanced at the covers of those books, and discovered the language that was written on the cover. What? How could they have belonged to humans? Gasped the others as they advanced towards the shelves after Lin Li. It was a known fact that although the High Elves did not ban humans from learning magic during the Dark Age, it was impossible for them to write any magic books for the humans. In the Dark Age, humans could only learn magic through the word of mouth, and slowly develop magic that belonged to the humans. Hence, every human mage at that time had their own set of notes about magic, which they valued as much as their own lives. CHCK Farouz Street Rise on No. V. L. Ben. C0M. Lin Li was extremely shocked as well, but he managed to come to terms with the huge collection of magic books when he remembered that the key belonged to Garesco. Garesco was known as the god of mages who'd pushed for the development of magic among the humans. Hence, it was not impossible for these magic books to belong to him. However, there was one thing that was confusing to Lin Li. He could not fathom the reason why these magic books were left behind in the castle. It had been more than 1,300 years since the end of the Dark Age. He wondered how magic would have advanced in human society if humans had gotten hold of this collection. Yet, since Garesko had left the magic books here, and he now possessed the key to the hall, Lin Li knew that all of these resources would be his to enjoy. Just when Lin Li was about to ransack the books in the hall, all the books suddenly flew down from their shelves and projected a ray of light onto a common point. A figure appeared in the middle of the hall. That figure was a mage donned in black robes. Lin Li was stupefied when he saw the appearance of that figure. "Gee, Garesko," gasped Lin Li. He was right. The figure that appeared was the same figure Lin Li saw through the Spastime beacon spell when he was with Tutankhamun. The Spastime beacon spell was just like a recalling of time. It was just like meeting Garesko in real life. Of course, Lin Li regained his composure very quickly. He knew that the figure was just an image left behind by Garesko. However, Garesko's figure alone was intimidating enough. His existence was as daunting as a mortal king. As someone who had witnessed the mightiness of a mortal king's incarnation, how would Lin Li not be intimidated by Garesko's incarnation? The others who were standing behind Lin Li could guess the real identity of the figure as well. While they had met High Lord Osric in a mortal king's incarnation, they did not expect to see Garesko's incarnation here. It was not easy for common men to see the three powerhouses of Anril's history. Now that they had seen the three of them, they did not know whether it meant good luck. At the same time, Garesko's incarnation moved. He waved his hands and blurred the men's visions. When they regained clarity, Garesko's incarnation and Lin Li were nowhere to be found. The countless magic books vanished as well. They were left with a spacious hall and rows of empty shelves. Lin Li's view, on the other hand, was different from theirs. He saw that he was still standing before Garesko's incarnation in the hall. It was just that the rest of the men had gone missing. Lin Li could not even use his mental strength to sense where Connorus and his two undead followers were. To Archbishop Martin and the rest, it seemed that Lin Li had been taken away by Garesko's incarnation, yet to Lin Li, it was the other way round. Garesko's incarnation had transported Archbishop Martin and the rest of the men elsewhere, leaving him alone in that space. While the similarity across the two situations was the unchanged hall, it was as though they were in two different dimensions. "Garesko?" Lin Li asked carefully despite recognizing him long ago. Garesko's incarnation had yet to make any sound. His stern expression made Lin Li's heart skip a beat. Although Lin Li felt that Garesko would not do anything harmful to him due to the mission he'd left for him, he was unsure whether the mind of the legendary figure was as predictable as he hoped it to be. Garesko's incarnation did not reply to Lin Li. After he gave Lin Li a cold glance, he waved the staff in his hand and launched an attack on Lin Li without any warning. The movement of the magic staff called out numerous arrow-like bolts of lightning that aimed at where Lin Li was standing. F***ck, why didn't you warn me? Gasped Lin Li in shock. Garesko's incarnation was unlike a mortal king's incarnation, who spoke before launching his attack. However, Lin Li's curse was of zero use in his situation. It was fortunate that Lin Li could react quickly to the threat by establishing thousands of defenses, using his domain world with the 7 pieces of the debris of the stars. In reality, Lin Li was glad that the ability of Garesko's incarnation was akin to a mortal king's incarnations. It felt like he was around level 25. As Lin Li was at level 26, he knew that the Shadow's power was worse than his. Although levels were not the deciding factor for everything, Lin Li had been defeating opponents who were in a higher level than him ever since he entered Anril. Hence, although it caught Lin Li by surprise, the sudden attack made by Garesko's incarnation was not very daunting to him. Of course, Lin Li knew that Garesko's incarnation was not something for common men to trifle with, but he was confident in his full set of debris of the stars and his ability as a level 26 sanctuary powerhouse. This was especially evident when Lin Li battled High Lord Osric at the control panel of the central tower. Although it seemed that he was greatly challenged by Osric then, the battle was a great boost of ego. After all, Osric was a sanctuary powerhouse of level 27 or level 28. This did not mean that Lin Li had started to become arrogant. He just had the confidence to challenge Garesko's incarnation. It was absolutely crucial for one to be fearless in his battles. If not, he might not be able to exert his full potential and discount his combat prowess. Garesko's incarnation launched an extremely powerful first attack. The 1,000 arrow-like lightning bolts filled the space. They engulfed Lin Li and his domain world without warning. Every single arrow-like lightning bolt manifested a terrifying aura that challenged even the stars. It was doomsday within Lin Li's domain world as well. His sky was torn by the countless arrow-like lightning bolts, and the earth he was standing on started to erode. The cracks that filled his space made the entire domain world seem as though it was a mirror that had shattered. Yet, there was no sign of anxiety on Lin Li's face. He used his mental strength to activate the 7 pieces of the debris of the stars that were hidden in the space. At once, there were 7 colorful rays shining within the domain world. Then, the cracks in the entire domain started to heal at a speed that was visible to the naked eye. The countless arrow-like bolts were like fishes caught in the net of the 7 rays of light. They could neither pass through the light nor create any impact. Lin Li's domain world was extremely fragile. When he was battling Immortal King's incarnation and the resurrected Osric, that was not because it was weak, but rather due to the huge difference in power. Strictly speaking, the reason why Lin Li could defeat both of them was not due to his own abilities. If not for the external factors, there would have been a high chance for Lin Li to be defeated by Immortal King's incarnation and the resurrected Osric. However, while Garesco was only level 25, and one's level would not always be a deciding factor, it was a cap on his potential. No matter how talented a level 25 person was, he could only exert the powers within level 25. The only difference lay in his experience and tactics when using his powers. If he were to use a method that exceeded level 25, then he would not be in level 25. It was just like Lin Li. He had made himself a match for a level 20 legendary powerhouse when he had been at level 19, yet he could not use the realm magic that belonged to real legendary mages at that time. If he had been able to create magical domains, he would have been a real legendary mage, and not a level 19 archmage. Since Garesco's incarnation was at level 25, it meant that it was unable to use powers beyond level 25. Hence, he would not be able to create absolute destruction, like Immortal King's incarnation and Osric, in exerting maximum oppression to the domain world created by Lin Li, a level 26 sanctuary mage. Just when Lin Li thought that he had gained temporary safety after he blocked Garesco's attack, he felt an unusual force in his surroundings. Before he could react, an enormous hand that was created from mana tore into the space and caught Lin Li tightly in its grasp. This stunned Lin Li. Even if he was a sanctuary powerhouse who was close to the divine, he had a body of a vulnerable human. He could be wounded and die if he were to suffer from severe injuries. Although the soul of a sanctuary powerhouse was immortal, there would be no way for him to enhance his powers without his physical body. Osric was a good example. The perfect body he had created was not comparable to his original body. Lin Li was extremely satisfied with his current body. This was a body that was filled with great potential and magic. He would not be willing to accept if one were to offer him the perfect body of the Ashen Warlock. The Ashen Warlock had existed since the Dark Age, and despite having lived for a long time, he had not reached the level of the Immortal King yet. Besides, he probably might not improve any further in the future. On the other hand, Lin Li had only arrived in Anral for a few years, and yet he had already become a sanctuary powerhouse who had a huge potential and room for growth. A simple comparison would show the obvious differences between the two of them. However, the giant mana hand that grabbed Lin Li was not as simple as a hand that was condensed using mana. As soon as Lin Li was grabbed by the mana hand, he felt a massive amount of strange mana surging into his body, causing the mana that was running in his body to stagnate. Mana shackle. A sanctuary master was struck with the mana shackle. The battle between Lin Li and Garesco's incarnation had only lasted for a few seconds from the beginning before ending up in the former's defeat, in the middle of a domain world that was made up of debris of the stars. That outcome was a huge blow to Lin Li, as it gave him a new perspective on his understanding of his own power. After Lin Li advanced to level 26 and his debris of the stars was complete, he always thought that his power was enough for him to contend with a level 27 sanctuary powerhouse. However, Garesco's incarnation was now only at level 25. Just as Lin Li was feeling hopeless, the mana hand that was restricting him suddenly disappeared, after which the mana that had been restrained in his body also returned to its original operational speed. "What's the matter?" Lin Li asked as he looked at Garesco's incarnation, finding it strange. "Do you think you have everything just because you have strength? Do you think that by exhibiting all your power, you can defeat all your enemies? You've really disappointed me." Garesco's incarnation hollered sternly with anger written all over his face, as if he was a teacher who was lecturing his student. Lin Li, who had just heaved a sigh of relief due to the disappearance of the mana hand, no longer looked relieved after hearing the words of Garesco's incarnation. Instead, he looked ashamed. He finally understood that just like the Immortal King's incarnation, the Garesco's incarnation was testing him. Lin Li had obtained the 3 things left behind by Garesco: the Evil Eye Tyrant's magical crystal that was used for improving mental strength, the Book of Eternity, that was used for increasing one's magical knowledge, and the key that was undoubtedly used to verify what was learned. Just like a final exam after the completion of a semester in school, Lin Li also had to go through an exam to test his knowledge. Lin Li had been studying the Book of Eternity for a long time, and he would read it during almost all his free time. He had gained a huge understanding of the content of the Book of Eternity, but it was another thing to put theory into practice during battles. In particular, after Lin Li had stepped into the sanctuary realm and gained the power of the complete debris of the stars, he had been pouring out all his power during most of the battles that he fought while neglecting the sharpening of his techniques, just like what Garesco's incarnation had said. For example, when Garesco's incarnation released countless arrows of lightning just now, the first thing that came to Lin Li's mind was to unleash his full power and resist the opponent's attack as hard as he could, because he knew deep down that the level 25 incarnation of Garesco would not be able to suppress him during such a head-on clash of power. However, Garesco had taught Lin Li that not all enemies could be suppressed with a powerful head-on collision. The loud arrows of lightning were just a cover that concealed Garesco's invasion of the domain world on the other side. When it clashed with the domain world, Lin Li had seen such techniques in the Book of Eternity too, and he also knew how to use them. However, he completely neglected it during the actual battle. Fortunately, Garesco's purpose was to test him, not to kill him. Otherwise, even if Lin Li had not died, he would have had to pay a huge price. Garesco did not give Lin Li much time to think. After lecturing him, the staff in his hand began to glow again, and a domain world was immediately opened. Although it seemed rather elementary, it was because Garesco's incarnation was only at level 25. After all, it was actually not considered a world at all, and was worlds apart from the legendary level domain world. However, Lin Li, who had already been taught a lesson, dared not belittle Garesco's incarnation at all. When he saw the latter opening, the domain world, he dared not delay for a single second, and quickly took out the Helios scepter. The large gemstone on it was also glowing with eruptive mana. The battle between the two sanctuary powerhouses broke out again, and although it seemed like a loud and powerful collision, both of them knew that the sounds were only superficial signs. Under the cover of the loud sounds, they each used their respective means, and the battle seemed to have become a battle of wits. It was no longer a clash of power, but also a clash of experience, knowledge, skills, and intelligence. So what if you're fast at casting spells? If you can't do any damage to the opponent, you'll just be wasting your time even if you can cast tens of thousands of spells immediately. Garesco's incarnation was just like the strictest teacher, who was continuously pointing out Lin Li's mistakes. If he were berating someone else instead of Lin Li, they might really kill themselves out of shame. At this moment, Lin Li finally discovered that even though he had learned a lot of magic, and had even stepped into the sanctuary realm that was coveted by countless people, he was still just like a mage apprentice in front of Garesco. That was not an exaggeration at all. Lin Li was a level 26 sanctuary master, who had powerful debris of the stars. By right, he should have an advantage when facing the level 25 incarnation of Garesco. However, Lin Li seemed to have suddenly become stupid and powerless in the battle with Garesco's incarnation. He seemed to have continuously stepped into traps. On the other hand, the traps that Lin Li had put effort into designing were useless in the face of Garesco. After he had painstakingly made Garesco fall into his trap, the latter would get out of it effortlessly. It was akin to a small pit, dug painstakingly by a child that would barely cause any injury to an adult who stepped into it. In just a few minutes, Lin Li and Garesco's incarnation fought for dozens of rounds, but Lin Li would have usually been caught by Garesco's incarnation after just 2 or 3 rounds. If Garesco's incarnation had had the intention to kill Lin Li, the latter would have probably died several times. However, based on that alone, it was obvious that Garesco's incarnation had not unleashed all its strength yet. Otherwise, how could he have used his power so freely? The fact that a level 26 sanctuary powerhouse couldn't even be on par with a level 25 sanctuary powerhouse was too much of a blow. All along, Lin Li had always been the one to launch attacks beyond his level, but this time he was the one being hit. That was a huge irony. However, Lin Li was not simply being hit. Despite having failed countless times and being beaten to a pulp within such a short period of time, he had also learned a lot during his fight with Garesco's incarnation. Compared to the Immortal King's incarnation, Garesco's incarnation was truly a dedicated teacher, who would sternly point out Lin Li's problems after defeating him. Lin Li had initially learned a lot of knowledge from the Book of Eternity, and a variety of techniques of mana usage during battles was deeply etched in his mind. The only thing he lacked was putting his theory into practice. Without actual practice, the knowledge he had would only remain theoretical. Only after having tested it himself would he be able to truly internalize the knowledge. After the sharpening and honing of his skills, Lin Li felt that he had gained a new understanding of the skills mentioned in the Book of Eternity. They were no longer just a type of knowledge, but had gradually become skills of his own. That was probably what integration was about. However, just as Lin Li unprecedentedly and perfectly exhibited the magic skills that he had mastered, and made Garesco fall into a trap with a design that amazed him, Garesco gave him a huge blow. Techniques and skills are just going to assist you. The true power of a mage comes from his understanding of the world, and this is how the world domain comes about. Garesco had finally stepped into the lethal trap that Lin Li had designed, but immediately after the staff in his hand stopped moving, Lin Li's domain world immediately collapsed, and the 7 pieces of the debris of the stars darted out of the domain world. The situation was instantly reversed, and the 7 pieces of the debris of the stars seemed to have lost control as they left Lin Li's domain world one after another. On the other hand, Lin Li was holding the Helios scepter and staring foolishly at Garesco's incarnation while anger surfaced in his heart. Lin Li felt that he had surpassed many other sanctuary masters of the same level in terms of his understanding of the world thanks to his comprehension of the laws of the debris of the stars. However, Garesco's incarnation had proven that Lin Li's comprehension and understanding were far from sufficient. Lin Li could completely feel that this incarnation of Garesco was not only restricted to level 25, but his understanding of the world similarly was also at level 25. However, it was obvious that although Garesco's understanding of the world was not profound, he had a more thorough understanding of what he ought to know at level 25. Debris of the stars, domain world. Lin Li finally knew where his problem lay. He was overly dependent on the domain world that was created using his debris of the stars, which undoubtedly caused his understanding and control of the domain world to become somewhat skewed. It was true that Lin Li could build a domain world that exceeded his current level with the power of the debris of the stars so as to display stronger combat power, but as a mage, his understanding of the world was actually what he truly needed the most. Just like what Garesco wrote on the cover of the Book of Eternity, knowledge was indeed the highest faith of a mage, and all other external items could only be used to provide assistance, not become a substitute for the knowledge possessed by a mage. A powerful external aid was like icing on a cake. If the user was incompetent, the aid would only seem like an empty gilded shell. With Garesco's reminder, Lin Li gave up on using the debris of the stars and rebuilt his domain world using his understanding of the world instead. Back then, in the Alana created by the Immortal King, Lin Li had obtained the soul memories of the High Lord's imposter. At that time, he had already obtained some understanding of the domain world. Hence, at this moment, it was actually more of a fusion of memories and turning someone else's possession into his own. Garesco's incarnation could acutely detect the problems that currently existed in Lin Li's domain world. He could also use those problems to destroy Lin Li's domain world again. In this process, Lin Li was also constantly making up for his shortcomings, repairing the problems in his domain world, and perfecting his control over it. In the process of fighting Garesco's incarnation, Lin Li finally understood why Garesco was known as the god of mages. It was not only because Garesco had led the rebellion forces to overthrow the rule of the High Elves, nor because he had established the Supreme Council and started the era of human magic civilization. Instead, Lin Li felt that it was because Garesco was just like an omnipotent god, who knew almost the answer to everything related to magic. Lin Li could no longer remember exactly how many times he and Garesco's incarnation had fought, but he knew that he would often lose within an extremely short period of time. However, the fact that Lin Li could clearly sense his own growth and discover the problem before resolving it was part of his growth process. Boom! A completely blank area with no mana fluctuations suddenly erupted with shocking power of destruction. Once again, Lin Li fell into a trap laid by Garesco's incarnation. But this time he did not panic at all, and the Helios scepter in his hand immediately shone brightly. The world domain around him seemed to be breathing and contracting to the point where it was almost sticking to his body. It then expanded violently like the explosion that happened during the birth of the world, immediately pushing away the damage of the surroundings. However, Garesco's incarnation that was opposite did not compliment Lin Li for his ability to adapt to changes. Instead, he quickly pointed his staff that was glowing with mana at Lin Li. Immediately, flowers of black flames appeared in the air, and the black flames that could burn the air immediately pressed onto Lin Li's domain world before engulfing it with an uncontrollable power. Previously, Lin Li had suffered because of the black flames flowers. Although the domain world created by the 7 pieces of the debris of the stars was not susceptible to head-on collisions, such erosive and penetrative attacks were a huge headache for Lin Li. His previous domain world relied on the massive power of the debris of the stars, and his lack of understanding of the world was the greatest weakness of his domain. However, the domain world that Lin Li had constructed this time did not involve the use of any debris of the stars. Instead, he constructed it using his understanding of the world, which had improved greatly especially after going through those battles. Although his current domain world was not as powerful as the one constructed from the debris of the stars, it had higher tenacity. Despite seeing that the black flames flowers were burning the exterior of the domain world, Lin Li raised Helios' scepter unhurriedly, causing the entire domain world to begin operating together with his movements. The power from the domain world was just like an extension of Lin Li's limbs. It no longer seemed as obscure as before. Waves of power of the world were continuously vibrating and coordinating well, thus gradually extinguishing the black flames flowers. However, Lin Li had yet to fully achieve his agenda. He could not simply defend, as that would cause him to slip into a passive position, where he could not make a comeback, especially when dealing with an opponent like Garesco. In terms of seizing opportunities, there was probably no one in Anral who could compare to Garesco. Hence, Lin Li had to deny the other party any chance to take advantage of something, and think of ways to turn the latter's opportunities into traps. While Lin Li was using the vibrating power of the world to extinguish the black flames flowers, his domain world was also continuously expanding and disintegrating as if it was about to collapse, and power of the world seemed to have become unrestrained as it spread towards its surroundings. Although Garesco had seen the changes in Lin Li's domain world, he did not take the bait. Instead, he waved his staff in his hand, after which a massive lightning halo expanded in all directions with his body as the center, bouncing off all the world power that Lin Li had spread towards him. Garesco's response was not beyond Lin Li's expectations. If Garesco had taken the bait so easily, Lin Li would not have been tortured for such a long time. After the world power he manipulated was bounced away, Lin Li immediately waved his Helios scepter, and the six-pointed star emitted rays of black and white light. It was also spinning rapidly and scattering the light in all directions, almost engulfing Garesco's figure. After colliding with the rays of black and white light, the lightning halo that Garesco had just released did not get bounced off like before. Instead, it seemed to have penetrated it without any obstructions, as if it was moving through the air. Lin Li used the power of light and darkness as well as space power on the black and white six-pointed star to place it on a parallel surface. Since the black and white six-pointed star and the lightning halo did not exist in the same layer of space, the lightning halo, of course, could not bounce off the power of light and darkness. However, due to the fact that they did not exist in the same layer of space, the power of the black and white six-pointed star could not cause any substantial damage to Garesco. However, Lin Li's purpose of doing that was not to scare the other party. Amidst the rotation of the black and white six-pointed star, a black hole was formed in the middle of the six-pointed star. A powerful suction force was generated, shrouding Garesco's incarnation. At the same time, a hand of light and darkness appeared from the black hole and reached towards the bottom of Garesco's incarnation. That magic spell was known as the right hand of God, in the Theurgy of Holy Light. A single grasp of it could uproot a city and bring it into another dimension. Legend had it that when the Brilliant Shrine and the Supreme Council worked together to get rid of the Black Current in the Sunset Mountains back then, Pope Rosario had once used that magic spell to capture tens of thousands of rampaging magical beasts, after which he placed them in a different dimension. The right hand of God that Lin Li cast was even more powerful than the one that Pope Rosario had used back then. Due to the fact that the target was only Garesco's incarnation, the power was even more cohesive, and was much more difficult to resist. If Lin Li had cast it at another level 25 sanctuary powerhouse, they might have already been brought to another dimension. However, despite being faced with the hand of darkness that was reaching out to him at the bottom, as well as the powerful suction force of the black hole, Garesco did not seem to take them seriously at all. Just as the hand of darkness was about to land, a faint halo appeared around Garesco. All of the light then surged upwards and converged into a pillar of light that darted towards the air. After the silent contact, the hand of light and darkness fell into the pillar of light, as if it was moving into a white hole from another black hole. After the light pillar engulfed the hand of light and darkness, it shot into the black hole in the center of the six-pointed star, instantly causing it to be shrouded by light. When the light dispersed, everything disappeared without a trace, as if none of it had ever existed. However, at this very moment, there seemed to be sudden changes in Garesco's surroundings. The hall that was as large as the library had already vanished, and was replaced by a barren world. Lin Li stood quietly near it with an extremely sly smirk. Indeed, that place was Lin Li's world domain. Through various designs and schemes, he had finally incorporated Garesco's incarnation into his domain world. In the domain world, Lin Li was the supreme god. If Garesco's incarnation had level 26 strength, he might not be affected greatly, but the incarnation was restricted to level 25, after all. Although Lin Li could not completely kill Garesco's incarnation even in his own domain world, his advantage of being on his own territory could not be removed. Previously, Lin Li disintegrated his own domain world and maximized the spread of the power of the world in hopes that he would be able to incorporate Garesco's incarnation into his domain world when he reconstructed it. At that time, Garesco's incarnation obviously already knew Lin Li's intentions. Hence, he cast a magic spell to make Lin Li's world power bounce away. However, Lin Li did not allow the world power to bounce away freely. Instead, while casting the right hand of God, he seeped the diffused world power into the spatial level of the six-pointed star. On the other hand, Garesco's incarnation likewise used space power to bring himself to another spatial level, in order to resist the attack of the right hand of God. At this moment, Lin Li used the world power that he had long prepared to reconstruct the domain world in the same spatial layer, and to incorporate Garesco's incarnation into his domain world. Although the process seemed simple, it actually involved profound knowledge of magic. He had also reached a certain level of extremity in the techniques of using magic. Besides, the exchange of blows only took place for a second. Previously, Lin Li would have never been able to complete all these arrangements in such a short time. Lin Li had incorporated Garesco's incarnation into his domain world. Although he did not launch a final attack, it was obvious who had obtained victory. Once a level 25 sanctuary powerhouse was in the domain world of a level 26 sanctuary powerhouse, all experience and skills would be of no use, and their realms would be the decisive factor. Garesco's incarnation had indeed stopped all of his movements too. After looking around at the scene in the domain world, he finally looked at Lin Li, and his sullen face finally eased up. He calmly said, "The immortal king has gone on a wrong path, and I think I have too. I wonder what your future path will be like." Lin Li initially planned to show off a little, and he expected to hear some praises from Garesco too. However, to his surprise, he heard those words. With a look of astonishment, he immediately asked, "Path? What do you mean?" However, Garesco's incarnation did not answer Lin Li's question. He seemed to be relaxed because he had completed his mission, and his figure gradually became transparent. Soon, he vanished out of sight. "Hey, what exactly do you mean?" Lin Li probed. However, he still did not get any answers, even after Garesco's mana fluctuations completely disappeared from his domain world. With the disappearance of Garesco's incarnation, the surroundings changed again, and everything became warped and blurry. However, they soon returned to normal again. At this moment, Lin Li looked at the spot behind him, only to see his subordinates, Archbishop Martin and the others, as well as the magic books, that were floating around slowly. In the eyes of Archbishop Martin and others, the space was also distorted. They watched as Lin Li's figure gradually appeared together with the magic books, that seemed to be floating down slowly like they were struck with the levitation spell. "Master Flick, it's great that you're all right. Where did you and Garesco's incarnation go just now?" Seeing that Lin Li seemed to be fine, Archbishop Martin immediately greeted him with happiness written all over his face. While walking, he asked about what had happened. "Nothing. I just received some pointers about magic from Garesco's incarnation," Lin Li answered briefly. He did not go into detail about what happened just now, and instead began to put those magic books into the Ring of Endless Storm one by one. Archbishop Martin and Donald were somewhat jealous to see Lin Li putting away the precious magic books for himself. However, that was all they felt. After all, the Sky Castle belonged to Lin Li. Hence, everything in the Sky Castle would naturally belong to Lin Li too. Besides, the Brilliant Shrine specialized in holy light magic, while the Rotterdam Kingdom focused on the research of alchemy. Hence, magic books were not too valuable to them. Since Lin Li was not willing to explain what happened when he disappeared, Archbishop Martin and Donald could not probe further, either. If Lin Li had made some great gains, it would just make them feel even more envious and jealous. Hence, knowing that would create more trouble for themselves. Of course, Lin Li had, in fact, gotten a greater gain, just like what Archbishop Martin and Donald were worried about. Through this period of fighting with Garesco's incarnation, the experience and skills he had gained from the Book of Eternity and various other means had been verified well, and he had turned the belongings of others into his own. That definitely played a huge role in the increase of Lin Li's combat power. Previously in the Well of the Sun, Lin Li's strength had reached the peak of level 26 through the battle with the Immortal King's incarnation. However, that was only in terms of power. If one could not use his power well, he would be worlds apart from level 27, even if he had reached the peak of level 26. However, after the sharpening of his skills that Garesco's incarnation had put him through, Lin Li could already maximize the power that he held. He was truly a step away from level 27. The only thing that Lin Li needed now was an opportunity for advancement. As long as the opportunity arrived, there would be no slip-ups in his advancement to level 27. The magic books actually did not have much of a purpose for Lin Li, but they could fill the library of the Tower of Dusk to a great extent. Moreover, With these magic books, the mages of the Tower of Dusk could have an even greater advantage when learning magic. After all, they were all written by Garesco and were truly meant for humans. After putting all the magic books away, Lin Li led the crowd through the hall of the library following the structural layout of the central tower. They arrived at the spot that could bring them to the next floor, but a problem cropped up there. There were clearly stairs, but when Lin Li and the others made their way up, they ended up back in the hall of the first floor when they reached the end of the stairs. Is there some magic gear here? Archbishop Martin asked Lin Li in puzzlement. Lin Li took a closer look at the stairs, but he did not manage to see any traces of magic gears or magic traps. At the same time, he did not sense any strange magical waves, either. The stairs were just like ordinary stairs. Refusing to give up, Lin Li brought them up the stairs again and again, but the outcome was always the same, as they would always end up in the hall on the first floor. At this moment, Lin Li suddenly thought of Garesco's incarnation. Although Garesco's incarnation was indeed restricted to level 25, he could beat Lin Li, a level 26 sanctuary powerhouse, up. Could it be that the second floor was inaccessible to him, now due to his current strength? He was now at level 26, and after receiving the pointers from Garesco's incarnation, who had helped sharpen his skills too, he had gained complete control of level 26 power, and was just one step away from level 27. Once he reached level 27, he would definitely encounter similar issues. If he wanted to master the power of level 27 as quickly as possible, he would probably still need Garesco's guidance. In that case, could Garesco have left another test for him on the second floor of the tower? In any case, Lin Li was at least certain that the existence of the tower should not pose any threat to his control of the Sky Castle. Okay, it looks like we should go back. Since they could not get to the second floor to explore it, and Lin Li couldn't think of any other solution either, they had to put this matter aside for the time being. As for whether his guess was right, he would only find out after advancing to level 27. Hearing that Lin Li wanted to leave, Archbishop Martin and the others were secretly relieved because they finally did not have to take risks anymore. The Nether Storm was already terrifying enough, and none of them expected to see Garesco's incarnation there. If they went further up, God knew if they might encounter some terrifying creature. However, at the thought of the Nether Storm, Archbishop Martin and Donald immediately tensed up again. When they arrived, they were almost sucked into the Nether Storm. How could they take another risk on the way back? Besides, they also remembered clearly that when they entered, the surrounding Nether Storms gathered, and if they were to leave by the main door, they would be courting death, and not just taking a risk. Masterfully, how are we going to go back? Archbishop Martin and Donald asked Lin Li at the same time. Looking at the two of them who looked extremely worried, Lin Li smiled and said, "Of course we'll return the same way we came here." Lin Li was not scaring the two old men. In fact, other than returning the same way that they came, there was really no other good solution. However, through the battle with Garesco's incarnation, Lin Li had already gained a deeper understanding and greater control of his domain world. It wasn't impossible to protect them in the Nether Storm. Besides, Lin Li had left the Demon Gordon in the cannon room of the Dragon Cannon, and was ready to use the Dragon Cannon to alleviate some of the pressure on his side at any time. However, Archbishop Martin and Donald did not know of the great benefits that Lin Li had obtained from Garesco's incarnation. They only knew that the Nether Storm could devour even a sanctuary powerhouse. However, despite feeling terrified, the two were still thinking of ways to return. Basically, it was impossible. After hesitating again and again, they had no choice but to resign to fate. Of course, they had no choice but to accept it. Lin Li wasn't discussing it with them in the first place anyway. It was not up to them to decide whether to leave or not. It would be good enough if Lin Li greeted them. Seeing that the two of them had nothing important to say anymore, he opened his domain world and moved everyone inside his domain. Outside the tower, the huge Nether Storm that had converged had long since drifted away because it had lost Lin Li and the others who were its target. Hence, when Lin Li brought them out, nothing too shocking happened. However, due to their appearance, the Nether Storm that was floating nearby quickly changed its initial trajectory and swarmed towards them as if it was a shark that had smelled blood. In the past, Lin Li would not be confident about escaping the Nether Storm. After all, there were no dragon cannons that he could use to attract the Nether Storm here. However, after being trained by Garesco's incarnation, Lin Li changed drastically within a short period of time. Lin Li was still at the peak of level 26, and the mana that he had did not increase during this period of time at all. However, his capability was far beyond that of the past. He had turned all the experience and combat skills that he gained from the Book of Eternity, the control crystal of the Sky Castle, and the Tyrant Balak's magical crystal into something of his own. Despite seeing the Nether Storms that were surging towards him, Lin Li did not panic, and it was as if he did not see them at all. He wrapped the rest in the domain world, and flew towards the nether storms on his own. However, that gave Archbishop Martin and Donald a great shock while they were in the domain world, because they could completely tell that at Lin Li's speed, he would not be able to break away from the nether storms. However, at this moment, violent explosions suddenly occurred one after another in the center of the nether storms that were far away. The power of the nether storms was not inferior to the dragon cannons at all. With the appearance of the huge explosion, the nether storms that were initially surging towards Lin Li hysterically clearly stopped for a moment. Though they did not immediately change their direction, it was as if they were hesitating because of a temptation. The sudden change gave Archbishop Martin and Donald a huge fright. Although they were only at the peak of the legendary level, they had never had the experience of exploring a nether storm. However, they knew that the nether storm would not explode on its own. Hence, the explosion immediately made them think of Lin Li, which was also the thing that made them feel shocked and puzzled. If they could attract the nether storm by casting a magic spell, the endless void would no longer be as dangerous as it was said to be in legends. The nether storm was not a dog, and the magic spells cast by the mages were not frisbees either. The mages would cause more intense magical waves when casting magic, and the explosion of the magic would leave behind magical waves too. Hence, the idea of attracting the nether storms, which were extremely sensitive to magical waves, by just casting a few magic spells was simply far-fetched. However, Lin Li had now seen through that common sense. Hence, before the magic spells in the middle of the nether storm were detonated, almost no one noticed when he cast the magic spells, as he was just like an assassin shooting an arrow in the dark. Such a casting method was definitely meant for those that were hiding in the dark, and for testing how many people could evade the sudden attacks when being caught off guard by a sudden magic spell that exploded on them. In comparison, Osric's subordinate, who was a mage assassin, was simply impressive. He was just a mage who was also an assassin, while Lin Li's casting method was truly an assassination magic spell. In reality, the casting method that Lin Li used was a technique that he had learned from the battles with Garesco's incarnation. During the first battle that they had after they met, the mana hand of Garesco's incarnation invaded Lin Li's domain world and grasped Lin Li, catching him off guard. In the domain world that Lin Li had created, he was just like the supreme deity who ruled over everything and was aware of all the changes in the domain world. However, Garesco's incarnation could fool Lin Li's perception and cast the magic spell in his domain world. That was much more profound than Lin Li's current methods. Lin Li probably still needed more training and tenacity to reach the level of Garesco's incarnation. However, he had already been studying the Book of Eternity for a long time and had inherited the experience of many powerhouses. Hence, after some pointers from Garesco, it was not difficult for him to reach such a level. After all, there was no domain world in the nether storm. Although the nether storm only paused for a moment, that was enough for Lin Li. Using that opportunity, Lin Li's flying speed immediately increased to the maximum, leaving behind a light shadow that flew up to the sky castle like a comet. At the same time, the demon Gordon, who had been left in the chamber, once again activated a dragon cannon and launched a giant fireball into the void. It attracted the nether storm around the launcher before spreading in other directions. In the blink of an eye, Lin Li's body penetrated the firing port and landed in the chamber of the dragon cannons. The domain world was abruptly put away, and everyone was released. It's finally safe. Archbishop Martin and Donald finally heaved long sighs of relief. Although they could still feel their hearts pounding rapidly, and everything seemed to have been simple, it was truly thrilling for them, and it was much more exciting than all the previous battles. Master Flick, if there is nothing else, I think we should also take our leave. I hope you will visit the brilliant shrine when you have the time, said Archbishop Martin, who had recovered from the shock. He immediately bade Lin Li farewell for fear that his heart would explode if anything more were to happen. Donald similarly dared not stay behind any longer. Although it was a good thing to get close to the Tower of Dusk, it would not be worth it if he had to sacrifice his life too. The entire Sky Castle now belonged to the Tower of Dusk, and even if he risked his life to join the exploration, he might not necessarily obtain a valuable item for himself. Upon hearing that they were going to leave, Lin Li seemed to have suddenly thought of something, as he patted his head and smiled awkwardly. I'm really sorry, but you guys can't leave yet. Upon hearing his words, Archbishop Martin's and Donald's heart immediately tensed up, and their faces grew sullen. Actually, they had always been a little worried and afraid that Lin Li would go back on his word and make them surrender what they had gained during the exploration. After all, to them, the High Elven Queen's crown and the Immortal King's alchemy notes were all extremely valuable. Hence, when Lin Li said that they could not leave yet, Archbishop Martin and Donald deciphered his words differently, and thought that Lin Li wanted them to surrender the items before leaving. Masterful, what do you mean? Archbishop Martin was well aware that he was in no place to negotiate with the sanctuary powerhouse. It would be easier if he were facing Pope Rosario. However, he was unwilling to give those items away. After all, his team had suffered great losses this time. If they did not get anything at all, wouldn't he be a sinner? As for Donald, he seemed even more conflicted, and there seemed to be some fear in his expression too. In his opinion, the Brilliant Shrine was at least on good terms with the Tower of Dusk, and could perhaps negotiate with Lin Li. However, he had offended the Tower of Dusk several times before. Although he had tried to make up for it later, his effort had been one-sided, and Lin Li, the president of the Tower of Dusk, did not seem to accept it at all. Hence, in Donald's opinion, Lin Li probably meant that he wanted to settle scores with him, on top of making him give up the alchemy notes. The people from the Rotterdam Kingdom might not be able to return, either. However, just as Archbishop Martin and Donald were letting their imagination run wild, Lin Li did not seem to have noticed anything. While taking them away, Lin Li said, "Actually, it's nothing much. Due to some changes in the control of the Sky Castle, the original teleportation portal has already stopped functioning, so you won't be able to return using the teleportation portal." Actually, the idea was very simple. It was akin to the change in the lock of the door of a house when there was a change in owner. Since Lin Li was the new owner of the Sky Castle, he had to readjust the teleportation portals. Otherwise, no one would be able to go to the Sky Castle. It was not a public park anyway. So that's it. Archbishop Martin and Donald couldn't help but look at each other. There was a drastic change in their mood. They had been worried for a long time, and even their backs were drenched in cold sweat. But in the end, they had just been worrying for nothing. So that's what happened. Archbishop Martin smiled awkwardly, and wiped the cold sweat off his head. Of course, he complained about Lin Li deep down. "Don't be so vague with your words, okay? You'll really scare us to death." "Yeah. What did you guys think?" Lin Li did not expect a casual remark of his to scare them out of their wits. Hence, he was confused about their reaction. "Yes. What we mean is that if the teleportation portal can't be used anymore, how are we going to go back?" Archbishop Martin was naturally embarrassed to say that he was frightened, but the question he asked was indeed an issue that they had to be concerned about. The Sky Castle was now in the endless void, and the teleportation portal was the only thing that connected to Anral. If the teleportation portal could no longer be used, it would be troublesome for them to go back. However, Lin Li smiled, and unconcernedly said, "It's simple. I have to drive the Sky Castle to Anral, so I can give you guys a lift." "Sure, thank you, Masterful." Archbishop Martin and Donald were thanking Lin Li politely on the surface, but deep down, they were incredibly astonished. They knew that Lin Li had obtained the Sky Castle, but owning it and controlling it were different concepts. Being able to manipulate the Sky Castle and move it to Anral meant that Lin Li could already exert a large portion of the power of that combat weapon. Thinking about the fact that the Sky Castle was about to appear above Anral, Archbishop Martin and Donald couldn't help but slip into a trance. They could imagine the shock that the Sky Castle would bring to Anral when it appeared. The Tower of Dusk, which owned the Sky Castle, would definitely become a strong force that ruled over the world. Even the powerful kingdoms would probably have to look up to the Tower of Dusk, as no kingdom would have the courage to become an enemy of the Tower of Dusk that owned the Sky Castle.
Thank you for watching Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share and subscribe. Have a great day.